to Save Your Sanity, Help for Toxic Relationships. I'm Dr. Rhoberta Shaler, and I'm glad you're here. In this episode, we're going to be talking about some very clear ways to see why emotional abusers prefer people pleasers. Anybody who has people pleasing tendencies, and they're quite unconscious in many cases. So it's not like that you're doing it on purpose. But once you start to learn that abusers really hone in on pushing on that people pleasing button, then you will understand where you need to go to get your personal power back, because you were likely taught to be nice, just be nice. And that comes in many phases and many degrees, but it also can mean overdoing going the extra mile, or overdoing letting too many things slide, or overdoing giving too much benefit of the doubt. And then things are out of balance, and they stay out of balance. And hijackals love things to be out of balance. So it becomes very important to understand these 10 ways and whys of why emotional abusers prefer people pleasers. And if that sounds familiar, you're going to want to stay and listen to the whole thing. Are you in a crazy-making relationship? Feel anxious, angry, and unsafe? Welcome to Save Your Sanity. Insight, skills, strategies, and inspiration for emerging empowered from toxic relationships and breaking the bonds of emotional abuse. Keep listening. We'll figure a few things out. You may just really want to keep the peace. You'll do almost anything to keep the peace when you're with a hijackal. And if you haven't joined me before, hijackal is my term for people who hijack relationships to meet their own needs and purposes. And then they relentlessly scavenge those relationships for status, power, and control. So if that sounds familiar to you, you will know why you can use my term hijackals. So when you get into the relationship, of course everybody wants to please everybody else. Of course that's what we do. We put our best foot forward. We show our best selves. We pull back and restrain ourselves from spitting out things that come naturally, or doing things that we don't think show our best self. Eventually, though, and usually sooner rather than later, when you're in relationship with a hijackal, those things start to show up, the things you very much wanted to keep hidden. But you've already been chosen by a hijackal. And if that's the case, then you want to keep them happy, because it's the healthy thing to do. It's the natural thing to do. It's the loving thing to do. You think, oh, this is a relationship in which we're cooperating and collaborating, compromising. There's some give and take. It'll all be good. Let's make sure that it's equal. You're thinking that. But as you get into a relationship with a hijackal, you realize there is no equality. And it begins to be less and less equality. And it's certainly not something that hijackals want. They definitely don't want to see any equality in the relationship. But you want to keep the peace, so you perhaps go along a little more than you should, and you think, oh, well, pretty soon they'll get it, that I'm really on their side, that I'm really loving them, that this is a stable, secure relationship. And yet they keep taking and taking and taking. And the balance shifts. And maybe you still want to keep the peace. So I'm going to talk about this a little later more, but maybe you've adopted a way of fawning, which is doing almost anything you can to keep them happy while denying your feelings of discomfort. And the question is, you may want to keep the peace, but whose peace are you focusing on? You may think it's yours because you don't want the upset, and that's absolutely true. But you're also endeavoring to enable the hijackal to keep behaving badly because you want to keep their peace too. And you try to keep them quiet. You try to keep them from becoming enraged or annoyed or irritated on their way to being enraged. So it's quite natural thing to do, but you're perpetually in a down position. You're always going to be less than them because that's the way they operate, and that's the only way that they operate. So you get used to being told you're wrong, things are your fault, you don't matter, who cares about what you think, and maybe even go so far as to look at you and say, who do you think you are? You think I care about what you feel or what you need or what you think or what you want? Huh. No, hijackals don't care about that, except as information that they can weaponize and use against you later. So it becomes important to see that emotional abusers love you actually handing them your personal power. They love that. And so if they don't have to teach you to do that, if you have already learned that, if you have some people-pleasing behaviors, then they go, oh, I don't even have to train you. That's a good thing. And so they want you to go further. They want you to allow them to be demanding and dismissing and discounting and even degrading and without complaint. And so you find it getting harder and harder to please them and to get their approval, and you keep fawning a little more and more. So I've done 2 shows on fawning. You can look them up. Just go to saveyourSanityPodcast.com if you want to find them quickly rather than where you usually go to get your podcasts. Save Your Sanity Podcast is the easiest place. And fawning is a coping strategy that goes along with fight and flight and freeze. And it's when you display exaggerated flattery or exaggerated affection or exaggerated interest in the other person's needs, and you forget your own. Is an unconscious attempt to stay safe and maintain connection in an unsafe relationship. Now that's important. It's an unconscious attempt to stay safe and maintain connection. So you don't want to be alone. You want again to try and reach out to the hijackal in an unsafe relationship. And so you become a people pleaser by default, perhaps in the relationship, but the hijacker would be very happy if you already had their best interest at heart before they had to demand that they deserved more attention than you do. Now maybe it's beginning to sound a little bit familiar, because the hijackal believes that they deserve all the oxygen in the room. They deserve all the attention. They deserve to have all the focus, and you don't. And that gets worse and worse with many hijackals. So you start fawning, which is what people with any sort of people-pleasing tendency have, but also people who have a healthy response to, okay, I'll put in my work. I'll put in my part of the compromise. I will go the extra mile, which is healthy. The issue is, as you'll see as we go through this episode, that when that is your only focus, it gets totally out of balance. And it's going to be you losing and losing and losing, and them demanding and demanding for more. And that's exhausting. It wears you down, it tears you down, it puts you down. It is not a good place to come. So you may have become a people pleaser to avoid conflict, and you will certainly be in a position in a relationship with a hijackal to want to avoid conflict. And you may have become used to appeasing your abuser to minimize distress or danger. You don't want it to continue, right? You want to, oh, please make it stop. Whatever you want, whatever you say, I agree with you. You're 100% right. Just make it go away. And it's so important because you're exhausted. You're way too tired for all of that stuff. And you don't see an end to what's making you so tired. And you end up saying things if you're a people pleaser in this situation and you're fawning, you say things like, of course you're right, I am a mess. You're right, I'll try harder. And then, or I'm so grateful you put up with me. Something on that order, that you start trying to flatter, trying to find some affection, trying to suggest the other person's wonderful and put yourself down. So now you're doing their work for them. You're actually putting yourself down and they don't even have to. Or, you might say, I know I'm a trial to be with, but I'm really working hard at it. Please, please, please stay with me. And so we get into a place where if you're already have a feeling or have learned to people please because maybe you had to in your family of origin, maybe that's what everybody did, whatever caused you to learn that sets you up to be a magnet for hijackals. And that's just a, a particular equation that works that way. Hijackals are basically lazy emotionally. So if they can find somebody who's pre-groomed to let them do their worst or to say whatever they want to say or behave however they want to behave, they think that they've won the lottery. They don't have to do the work. They don't have to put you down and get you used to being put down or put in your place, as they're fond of saying. And in that response, you fawn in order to minimize the damage and the danger, as opposed to being aggressive, which would be to fight, or as opposed to running away, which would be the flight response, or becoming paralyzed and unable to think or make a decision, which would be the freeze response. Fawning is, oh, I'll just come over and kiss your feet, and you will be way above me, and I will demonstrate to you that you're right, I'm nothing. And maybe the rage will not come. Maybe the silent treatment will not come. Maybe you can head this whole thing off at the pass if you fawn. And if this is starting to sound familiar, just know these are learned patterns. They can be unlearned. They can be changed. I'm talking about the fawning ones, the emotional abuse patterns that hijackals perpetrate. That's a class all of themselves. They very seldom want to change. But you can change the habit of people pleasing or fawning because it may save you in some moments from unwanted rage and all. And I understand that. And it's good that you have a technique. But overall, you're just depleting and diminishing all the time. And at some point, there's going to be nothing left of you. So it may be time to step out and change that, to see that that's not a way to live your life. You don't want to always be less than another human in that other human's eyes. And you don't feel good. You don't feel as though you really have substance. You can't gather any confidence. You don't feel competent even sometimes when they do things like that. So fawning is about agreeing with everything the abuser says about you, or do whatever they want you to do to get their approval, or even pretend you don't have feelings. Oh, no, what I want doesn't matter. It's all about you. And they love that because, of course, now you know. Now you're showing me that you know that it's all about the hijackal. And the hijackal likes that. But fawning is directly related to codependency and people pleasing. And those two things don't make you feel good when you're engaged in those behaviors. You always feel less than you could. Now, of course, a hijackal is going to tell you you're not good enough no matter what. But if you've started to tell yourself you're not good enough and you are engaging in this fawning behavior, then we want to change that. And I hope you want to change that. And if you want my help to change that, you can just go to beaclient.com and you can make a 1-hour new client appointment with me there. It's a one-time offer for only $97. Go to Be a Client. And if you're not quite ready for that, you can join my emerging empowered community at joinintoday.com. joinintoday.com. So let's get on with these 10 ways that emotional abusers prefer people-pleasing folks. I know this can be hard to hear, but it also can be one of the most important things you'll hear. So hang in there with me. So the first one I want to talk about is something I mentioned already. The emotional abusers prefer people pleasers because they don't have to train or groom you to get you to comply with their wishes or to get you to agree that they are on a pedestal and you don't have a seat. You know, that is important to notice, the attitude of the person you have in mind, which is that they are superior to you. They're more important than you are. What they need or want or think matters more than anything you could possibly say. So there's a reason why they like people pleasers, because people pleasers will relinquish their needs and wants. Another second reason is you're already practiced in ignoring your own feelings. And so you're used to elevating the feelings of others. And the abuser says, great, great. You know, I like it when my feelings are more important than yours. My needs are more important than yours. My opinions are more important than yours. So you're already practiced in ignoring your own inner voice, your own feelings and needs, and you are used to looking after those of others. The third one is that people pleasers check to see, and abusers like this, they check to see that what the abuser likes, and if the abuser likes what the people pleaser is saying, they're very hyper vigilant about, you know, how do you like me so far? And then they go along with it. Whatever the hijackal wants, whatever the abuser wants, they will go along with. Oh, yes, you're right. And obviously, a hijackal or any other emotional abuser wants people to agree with them, because then there's no argument, there's no conflict. And you don't want any conflict, because conflict with them is very unpredictable. It can go to 0 to 60 in a hot minute, into a rage that lasts to the silent treatment for 3 weeks. You know that already. You're not signing up for that. So you get quiet and you step back and you put your needs way, way, way distantly away. The fourth thing why emotional abusers prefer people pleasers is that people pleasers are focused on appeasing other people. They want to make and keep abusers happy. And you can see how it goes sideways. Because when we fall in love and we get into a full-time relationship, we believe, as healthier humans, and for those of you who haven't heard this before, I make a distinction between people who are emotionally healthier humans and people who are emotionally hijackal humans. And people who are emotionally healthier humans, they already know that there needs to be some compromise in a relationship, some give and take. So you give thinking that it will come back to you at some point. And it often takes a while for the penny to drop that it is not coming back to you. As a matter of fact, you're being asked to give up more and more, to take less and less. And sometimes that can really hurt when you figure it out and sound like a really big hurdle to stop doing. And it is. And I can certainly help you with that. Remember that URL, go to beaclient.com. And it's a opening, it's an awakening place when you realize that if I keep allowing a hijackal to be more important than I am, and I don't mean anything less than equality, not suggesting that anybody's better than anybody else, it just needs to be equality. And if there is a situation in which you are constantly appeasing the other person or focused on, are they happy? What do they need? You're constantly focusing on them. There is no equality. There is no balance. And number 5 is people pleasers have few, if any, but usually no boundaries. And they don't want you to be able to have any. So it's very attractive to them if you are a people pleaser that you won't exert your boundaries. You may be fearful of being aggressive, so you don't do it. Or you may be fearful of the wrath of the hijackal, so you don't do it. And I'm not pretending for 1 minute that anything that I'm talking about is easy. It isn't. I can say all of these words, and I think everyone who listens to this podcast knows this is hard work. It's daunting work. It really means picking yourself up from the bottom of your shoes and saying, I'm going to take a step. I know that. So I hope you really recognize that. I recognize that. I've been there. I know what it feels like. I really have. All right, number 5, as I was saying, is if you don't have any boundaries, you make life easy for a hijackal. Because if you don't have any boundaries, there aren't any consequences to what they do to you. So that makes you very attractive to a hijackal. And number 6 is that people pleasers are afraid people don't like them. They're afraid that they're not good enough. So they're easier to control. Now, what warms the heart of a hijackal more than somebody who's easy to control? And they want it to get easier and easier as well. So if you are concerned about them not liking you, please get more concerned about the fact you don't like them, right? Because it gets out of balance quickly. And when you can stop yourself, even on that one, on number 6, if you could just take number 6 and take it to heart and work with it, that if I'm afraid that they don't like me, can I turn that on its head and realize I don't like them much? And what would you do differently then? How would you begin to become more assertive within yourself? And I've written a lot about the personal weather report. It's in the book Kaizen for Couples. There are many ways to become assertive without being aggressive. And that's what you want to be doing. Okay, number 7, ways that emotional abusers prefer people pleasers is that people pleasers will cater to the needs, desires, and whims of a hijackal, and they will put their own needs in the far distance and just pay full attention to the other person. Now, if that's your child, great. If that's your partner, your parent, or your sibling, not great. Not great. Because always remember episode 115. 3 must-haves of a healthy relationship. You must have equality, reciprocity, and mutuality. And if you don't have them, you don't have a healthy relationship. So if a hijackal is wanting you to cater to their needs and whims, one day they want something The next day, they want the opposite. And they expect you to whip around 180 degrees to meet their needs. It's unrealistic. But if you are really downtrodden at the moment, you may be trying hard. And again, it'll do you so much good to realize that you don't have to worry if they like you. It's time to think about, do I like them? And you may have liked them once, but you don't like who you're seeing now, right? That's important. And number 8 is people pleasers identify more by who likes them than they identify by knowing what they themselves value and believe and stand for. In other words, they give their life away. They just give it away. So they adopt the views and the positions and the words of the hijackal. And you may even find yourself saying what the hijackal has said to you, what the abuser has said to you, as a way of putting yourself down and keeping yourself small. But an emotional abuser wants you to feel small. So it's important to see. Number 9 is people pleasers will wear yourselves out, jumping through the hoops of the hijackal. And hijackals know that, and they do it for sport. They honestly do it for sport. How can I make that person feel useless? How can I make that person cry? How can I make that person feel unimportant? They do it for sport. They really do. And they'll do things, nasty things. I've had clients from all areas of the world. Well, not all, never Antarctica, but from many, many areas of the world. And they report all the horrible things. A hijackal who's extreme will come in the middle of the night, wake you up, make you do whatever they want to do. They want you to cook. They want you to keep them company. They want you to have sex. They'll do anything. And you get exhausted and they don't care. They will wake you up just because they can and they want to have power over you. And so you will, if you're a people pleaser, you will wear yourself out. And the hijackal will make sure you do, because the hijackal is constantly asking you to jump hoops that are totally unnecessary. Totally. You've probably seen it on Facebook, where it says, nobody falls in love faster than a narcissist who's lost their job and doesn't have a home. Because they will glom onto someone and love bomb them and then sit on their butts and refuse to work, refuse to participate, refuse to bring money, and make the other person wrong for not making enough money, not working hard enough. It goes to those extremes. It truly, truly does. And it's important to see that. Because if you're with somebody who will wake you up just to keep them company, they don't value you. They simply don't value you. And the last one, I arbitrarily chose 10, so I wouldn't go on too long. But the last way that emotional abusers prefer people pleasers is because people pleasers don't complain. They're too understanding. They're too accepting. They take the crumbs, as I talked about last week. Don't settle for crumbs. You will, if you settle for crumbs, suffer from emotional malnutrition. That was last week's episode. But that will happen. People pleasers don't complain because other people don't like it when you complain, especially if you complain about them. So are you recognizing yourself in this? Are you recognizing patterns that you have or used to have with a partner, a parent, with a sibling? So you want to take back your personal power. You really do. I'm writing a new book right now called Breaking the Bonds of Emotional Abuse. And these things are so important. So very, very important to see and do. So if you're more focused on making the other person comfortable while discounting your own discomfort, you are out of balance. And that's a good place to start, to figure out, am I more concerned with making somebody comfortable or staying out of their way or doing whatever I need to do to avoid any further abuse? And if I'm doing that, then maybe I recognize I am out of balance. Now, you don't get back into balance in a heartbeat. Don't do something extreme. Just start to understand this. Start to say, I recognize I'm out of balance. I see it. I'll begin to change that in small ways, because otherwise it'll keep you as a prime target of a hijackal, the one you're experiencing now, or if you don't do the work and change this, the one you'll experience next. And begin by being able to say no. First of all, say it on the inside, then say it in small, in almost insignificant ways to the hijackal, and then get a little more bold and a little more bold. But learn how to say no, not in a confrontative way, but by using the personal weather report. And as you do that, you will begin to take back your power. You'll begin to rectify the imbalance, and you will cease being attractive to hijackals and other emotional abusers, because you will no longer be putting other people's comfort, needs, wants, preferences ahead of your own. You will be looking for equality, reciprocity, and mutuality, or you'll be moving on. So I hope that helps. And until we speak again, take very good care of yourself, because you're precious and you matter. Talk soon. All right. Good evening, everyone. And welcome. Welcome. All right. So whomever put up this Instagram stuff, know that you are not allowed here anymore. And we'll make sure to make that happen. There are no spammers in this group. We're real. Hi, Hunted. Hi, Linda. Can't read that. Speed teacher. You're welcome. You're welcome. Alice says Monday evening church. Okay. Do I sound preachy? Sandra says 25 days out. This was my 5th attempt to leave. Good for you. I hope you're feeling empowered. By 25 days, are you breathing yet? I hope so. I hope that works for you. Do everybody know you can ask questions about anything in here each Monday evening. Doesn't have to be on topic. So make sure you do that if you have a burning question. Perfect. It says half of people tend toward the light, half the people toward darkness, but I estimate 25 at least are narcissistic hijackals. Well, the actual statistics are about 18%, but close enough, I guess. Sadly, research has shown that the numbers of diagnosed hijackals is growing. So if the ones who are diagnosed, that means that they've gone to a hospital or prison or had a psych eval, and most people don't go. So if those are increasing, it's highly likely that the ones who are undiagnosed are also increasing. Okay. Haunted says, abusers are never happy. Oh, isn't that the truth? They always want more and treat you like garbage if they don't always get their way. I'd rather be alone than have that. Good. Better to better to be alone than to put up with being abused. I am definitely on that side of the equation. And some people can't leave right away because of certain factors, but always be moving in the direction of making sure that there's equality, reciprocity, and mutuality, which there never will be with a hijackal. And if you can't leave right away, be making a plan, working on yourself, changing your communication style, changing how you think about yourself, changing your inner dialogue so that you are strengthening yourself until you can make that move. Destin says, feels like I'm useless. I'm not good enough. Well, that's exactly how a hijackal wants you to feel. So please don't give them the satisfaction. They're almost never right about you, because it's a reflection of their greatest fears of themselves. The concept is the concept of projection. A hijackal will project onto you what they're most afraid of is true of them. So instead of being insightful or self-reflective, which they're not, they will push it out and say, you're the narcissist, or you're the uncompromising one, or you're the one who's not good enough. And they're feeling that about themselves. But we all know that hijackals, particularly the overt ones, will never, ever, ever admit to being at fault or having a flaw. And the covert ones will say, oh, nobody cares about me anyway. And they play the victim all the time. So watch for that, Destin. You are good enough and you are not useless. And no matter, consider the source. Who's telling you that? And what kind of respect do you have for the person who's giving you the sense that you're useless and not good enough? I think if you think that went through, you'll pretty soon discard the idea that you're not enough. Because it's not the truth. And you don't appreciate the person who's telling you that. And you don't appreciate their ability to decide who you are either. Never let a hijackal decide who you are. You decide who you are. I know it sounds really, really easy and simple, but it isn't easy. It's just simple. And it takes a long time, many times. Ella, do you think is time the only key to seeing a person's true colors? Oh, time. Yes, I see. One who is very good at pretending to be exactly what you want and need in order to get you attached. Yes, I think time reveals true colors for sure. It reveals the true colors of a great partner, and it reveals the true colors of a hijackal partner. And when you start to notice the hijackal colors, you'll notice that the only time they go back to showing their beautiful colors is when they want something or they don't want you to leave. And then you begin to see that distinction and how clear it is. And when you see the patterns clearly, that's why I talk about patterns, traits, and cycles all the time. When you realize that they are patterns, traits, and cycles, and you can see them repeatedly, then you really begin to understand that the hijackal nature can be recognized. And that's really important. Alice says, I'm getting to the point where I can work on navigating instead of getting caught. How do you know? How do you know if someone is attracted to you because you're a people pleaser or if they're just a kind person? Well, to go back to the point above, time will tell, but it's a very good question to have at the top of your mind so you know what to be observing for. We all want to have people accept us as we are and be interested in us as we are. So it takes a little ferreting out. Who is this person really? And many times hijackals can hold on to their best selves for quite a while. And there'll be just little blips and you'll forgive them and you'll move on. But then it starts to be more than they can do. And you begin to see that those things that they said, oh, I didn't really mean that in the beginning, are really what they did mean, because they come up so frequently. So the question is, how do you know if someone's attracted to you because you're a people pleaser? You find out what happens when you disagree with them. When you say, oh, I have the exact opposite view of that. Let me tell you what I think. And then see what happens. See if they try to talk you out of it, if they make you wrong for it, or if they are curious or interested in you and wanting to learn more about you. It's a slow process. But do not be afraid to call them when you see them, these red flags, right? Don't be afraid. Don't go on too long. If it's really something wonderful there, you can say, I don't think I'm ready for this, and that person will come back. Don't be afraid of ruining it or missing something. Be assertive enough to say, this is what's important to me. This is how I feel about this. Lots of wiggle room for other people to feel differently, but notice how they respond to the differences. If they try to talk you into a place that makes them right and you wrong. All right, let's see. What else do we have? Okay, there we go. Her Serene Highness says, I hear you. Thanks for speaking to us. You are so welcome. Hanta said, they will tell you that everyone they know doesn't like me, especially if I tried to put out a boundary. Yeah, and that's a lie. That's not the truth at all. But the stories that a hijacker will tell about you have nothing to do with who you are. And the sooner you can get your head around that one, the less damage they will do to you. Remember, the hijacker always has to win. So they're going to say whatever they need to say in order to win, to be right, to make you wrong. They will tell a totally different story to your mother than they'll tell to your best friend from college. Their stories always change. And so if you try to keep up with their stories, that won't work out very well. And if you try to put out a boundary, that's a very good way to find out whether or not you're in a relationship that has any ability to maintain health. His boundaries are important. Boundaries say, here's where I stop in this process. This is the edge for me. Please know that. You can make agreements about all kinds of things, but a boundary is the final frontier. Like, do not cross this one, because it shows you have no respect for who I am. So hijackals hate boundaries. Absolutely hate boundaries. Linda says it helps to realize a lot of people aren't going to like you, and you aren't going to like a lot of people, and that's okay. It is okay. We're not here to garner the approval of everyone we meet. Knowing what your values are, knowing what your vision for your life is, knowing what you believe about relationships or money or how the world works best or spiritual beliefs, all of those things are unique to you. And you want to be with someone who is interested in you and comes together and connects with you on the really big stuff. That's very important. Okay. Oh, Alice says, I'm guilty of this. Okay. Well, awareness is everything. As soon as you see it, you're wiser. You can do something about it. Cosmo, good evening. Honda said, I do recognize myself and it's disturbing. Well, disturbing can be the beginning of change. Jean Walker, you do not use my YouTube channel for your advertising. Please, everybody, ignore that big piece of advertising. We've been seeing a lot of that lately, and it is spam. Okay, Rosa, you're welcome. You're welcome too, Cosmo. Ella, great. Love to see you booking sessions. Happy to do that. Dustin says, it's hard to leave because I want to give my kids a 2-parent household. Well, yes, I understand that completely. And it is hard to leave because there's so many elements to it. But you do need to ask yourself, what are my children experiencing? What are they seeing? What are they hearing? What are they feeling? And it's a big question as to whether you leave children with a hijackal spouse half the time, and then you fill in all the blanks half the time, or if you stay and try to protect them. I know what a big question that is, and every situation is different. So really think about using that introductory session, if you haven't already, to talk about that and find out what you can do about that, because it is difficult to leave. You know, people who say, oh, well, just leave, they have no idea what involved with that. Sure, just leave if you're being sexually or physically abused. But, you know, the rest of it, no. There's so many factors. And I truly understand that. Corinne said, I want to ask a question. Please, can you talk about grudges? I have many things to talk about from my relationship. I finally just left, but one of those things I struggle with is the grudges. Well, you holding grudges or them holding grudges? Because hijackals have memories like steel traps for what it is you did, even the things they made up that you did, and they will hold grudges. You know, I've talked to clients where the same weaponized grudge has come up in every fight they've had for 15 years, you know, because that's the way they roll. So hijackals love to do that, is the weaponization of what's happened before in order to use it to hit you over the head with it and stop arguments or have you back down. And it's really difficult. But certainly you struggle with the grudges because they have nothing to do with you. It's made up by the hijackal. And you get the result of it, but you didn't get the creation of it. So it's very, very difficult. Sandra says, yes, breathing, sleeping well, weighted the world off my children and myself. Good for you. Great. That's, you know, this is what happens. You know, it's you get, if you have been lying under a weighted blanket and then it's taken off, you notice. But if you've been buried in sand that's 10 feet deep, you are on the verge of not being able to breathe, and you notice. And it's time to recognize that. You've got to start getting the weight of this person off you, because it's so difficult. And then you'll do what Sandra says, you know, she's breathing, sleeping, and the weight of the world off her children and herself. But you leave when you can. You leave when, not really when you're ready, because sometimes it just feels like you'll never be ready. But when it makes sense to leave, when you realize that another moment of this is another moment too much. And then do it in a way that is really carefully constructed. Like if you go to relationshipprograms.com, that's part of my website, relationshipprograms.com. I have courses there to help you figure this stuff out. So go and have a look. Relationshipprograms.com. Yeah. Corinne says, I'll join your group with a membership. Good. Come on along. In the membership, an emerging empowered community, you get 3 group calls with me a month where you can ask me questions and so many other things. So do come along. Go to joinintoday.com. Alice says, no, you don't sound pretty at all. I just mean that this is nourishing my soul. Good. Preachy. Okay. H. Baker, my phone is shut off, so this is the first day I'm deciding no contact with this person who is always the victim and making false accusations to manipulate. Good for you. We all give you a high five. Turning your phone off and saying, I do not need another moment of this, when it's possible to do, is a great start, because you're saying you matter. And that's so important. Oh, thanks, Corinne. Oh, thank you for the $5, Linda. I appreciate that. Just, it's a wonderful way to support the work with the ways that you can do that on Facebook. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Corinne says also, he told me he studied psychology when I started to have all my traumas coming out when I met him. And what he did was yelling and judging me and dismissing my struggles. Yeah, little knowledge is a dangerous thing, right? He tells you that he studied psychology in order to have you defer to his wisdom, perhaps. And look how well that worked. It's so difficult. Hijackals are great liars and imposters. And they'll say they know things, a whole lot about things they know very little about, because they have to win. They have to be the largest person in the room. And so there you have a good example of it, Corinne. Terry, what do you do when someone says they don't like confrontation and will not talk with you to resolve a conflict? Well, it depends on the relationship. But if someone says, I don't like confrontation and I won't talk to resolve a conflict, then you say, and one of the ways that I would approach it is say, well, I value the relationship and this is a speed bump and we need to talk about it to get through it and over it, but I'm not going to sweep it under the carpet. And just have a boundary like that. Because you are entitled to say those things in that format, a personal weather report format. That's not the way I manage conflict, and I am not going to have resentments underlying, and I need to talk these things through. And if that doesn't suit, then the relationship will be changed. And that's so important, to be assertive in that way. To just say, okay, I honor the fact that you don't want to talk about it, but on my watch, this relationship is missing a piece if we can't resolve conflict and we can't talk about it, because that limits the relationship and it limits the growth and definition of the relationship. So I hope that helps, Terry. Okay. All right. I think, here we go. Corinne says, I started again my question. Grudges they hold against you and never let go of as a weapon. No capacity to understand nuances of why we do what we do and accept that sometimes. Yeah. A hijackal will take anything out of thin air, turn it into a weapon, and use it against you. Which is why it's really important to see when, you've been distant from them and you're longing for some connectivity. And so finally they give you a few breadcrumbs and you just like spill, you know, you talk about your feelings and you talk about so much because you've just had those breadcrumbs and you feel nourished for a moment and you just want to get it all out. And then you find out that 3 weeks from now, the things that you told them, you were so relieved to be able to tell them, have been turned into weapons and they start coming your way and undermining you. And that's what they do. And so these grudges, they may hold a grudge, but a response to that is, you know, hearing the same grudge over and over again does not move me in a direction of hope that this relationship will grow into something good. You know, learn to just speak about what's going on within yourself. And if they like to throw the same weapons at you all the time, just say, you know, yes, I'm aware of that. Just learn to be assertive in that way. So they don't feel like I can keep throwing these things at you and you're getting smaller and smaller. But you just simply say with total neutrality, I'm aware of that. And because they don't understand it, nuances, they're not nuanced themselves. So you're absolutely right there. And he was like a gold person. Touch me with a small finger and I'll punch you 100 times. Wow. Yeah, very much like a hijackal. Very much. Oh, I answered you. Okay. Good. All right. Haunted says, when I was with a hijackal, he was financially irresponsible and had multiple addictions. The stealing from me to get his fix. Sometimes when I had nothing for him, I felt he would harm me to get it. Yes, he would, I'm sure. You know, again, going back to what I talked about before, the healthier human planet and the hijackal human planet. You know, we so much, because they look like us, we want to believe they're like us, and we keep clawing at it. How can I find the part that's like me? How can I support them to feel secure and stable and stop having to make up all this stuff and fight against me all the time? So as a healthier human, you do that, but they're dedicated to not allowing that to happen. And it's really hard. They look like us, but they don't behave like us. Healthier humans generally agree that kindness, compassion, integrity, trust, respect, love, integrity, all of those things are important. But hijackal humans, they're different. They think about taking as much as they can, giving as little, not caring if they hurt somebody, and they don't mind leaving either. Those two worlds do not meet. They just don't meet. Oh, thank you for the support, Ella. I appreciate that. Sandra says, my coworkers have noticed a huge difference in me since I left. I'm not constantly nervous and looking over my shoulder or hyper conscious of the exact time of the drive from work to home. Yes, good for you. I mean, when you're with a hijackal, it's constant surveillance. Where are you? Why is it taking you that long? I thought you said you were going to do this. You know, when are you coming home? How many minutes is that? Who are you with? Constant surveillance. And when you leave and the phone is not active, it is such a relief. And I'm sure it shows in every possible way. So good for you. It's great to hear that. H. Baker said, made total sense when you made a comment about how they bring you down to their level. Yes, that's what they want to do. They think they're superior to you. but they play so dirty and nasty that they want you to come and play dirty and nasty. And then they'll provoke you to do that. And if you blow, you just blow because they provoked you, and you then end up being a person who is demonstrating reactive abuse, then they say you're the problem. Remember, the hijackals' only reason for breathing in any moment is to win and be right. So that means that no one around them is ever accorded the opportunity or the right to be right or to win. So it's always going to be very, very difficult. Very difficult. And when we can stop seeing them as being like us, they are not a puzzle to figure out, how do I reach the good parts? They're a puzzle to look at and say, what's the predominant pattern here? Do I like it? Do I not like it? And that makes all the difference. So I hope this has been helpful to you. I hope that thinking about people pleasing and emotional abuse has struck some chords for you. And if I can help you and you haven't used the one-time new client offer, go to beaclient.com or come on over to the Emerging Empowered Community at joinintoday.com. And until we meet again, Hanta says, it's like we project our kindness onto them. We try, but it just falls off. It's like they have a Teflon shield. It just here. Oh, you're so welcome, Veronica. I'm glad you joined us, and you're so welcome. So again, until we meet again, take very good care of yourself, because you're precious and you matter. And talk to you next week. Bye-bye.